We're using that new commentary from Rabbi Gordon and Rabbi Elad Applebaum, making our way through Pirkei Avot. And we're, again, just in chapter 1. Want to look at a couple more in chapter 1 and a couple in chapter 2 this morning. So, having said that, I know Jackie offered to be a reader. Anyone else want to be a reader today? Sherry, thank you. All right, why don't we start with Jackie, then we'll switch to Sherry, and then we'll make our way. So if you remember, we only did the first 6, and we actually skipped a few Mishnayot from Pirkei Avot. And if I remember correctly, the last one that we did was the famous one: find yourself a rabbi, acquire yourself a friend, and judge people favorably. So what we're going to see is, if you remember, we learned that from the transmission, from the opening of Pirkei Avot, that it went from Moses to Joshua all the way down to the elders and then the men of the Great Assembly. Then we had something called Zugot, which were pairs. They were 2 rabbis that were the leading rabbis of the generation. One was the head of the court, and one was the Nasi, with the leader. And we started to make our way through these and each one has their own set of teachings, and usually it's 3 teachings. So what we actually learned last time, that one, find yourself a rabbi, make yourself a friend, and judge people favorably, was the first of a pair. So we're actually now going to see the other section, and we're going to compare them, because that's what you do with pairs, is you always compare. So, having said that, let's take a look. I'll throw it on the screen. This should be it. All right, can you see my page?
Not yet.
Not yet. Can you see it yet?
Yes, yes.
Oh, there it is.
That was a long delay. Wow. Okay. So, So now we're going to make our way through. We are in Pirkei Avot 1:7. So, Jackie, you want to read first the top, the actual teaching?
Okay. Nital of Arbel like to say, Nitai. The print is small. Oh, I just made it bigger. Nitai of Arbel like to say, distance yourself from an evil neighbor, avoid association with a wicked person, and do not despair about divine retribution.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second. Just in looking at this, can you see what is the connection, and we're going to read about it in the commentary, but how does this relate to, if you remember, the previous teaching was, make yourself a teacher, find yourself a friend, and judge people favorably.
Well, this is like the other side of it, that all of these things are communicating.
Yeah, right.
If you're near good people, you'll learn to be good. And here, if you're hanging out with, bad people, you're going to become part of them.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't mind, we'll go and start reading Rabbi Tucker's commentary. Distance yourself.
Distance yourself from an evil neighbor. Avoid association with a wicked person. The teachings of the diarch of this generation again complement each other. This Mishnah and the previous one, just as we saw above at 1:4-5, whereas Yehoshua ben Parachia counseled us concerning the kinds of associations to make. Nitai of Arbel now warns us against association with evil and evildoers. The concern of this particular generation's teachers with how the company will keep affects us is noteworthy. It too is an element of the wisdom of the Hellenistic world, to which this tractate owes so much. And do not despair. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
We're gonna Yeah, keep going. Wait, so the question is, and this is what they're going to ask is, does this seem to be connected? Do not despair about divine retribution. Why is that connected to this? Distance yourself from an evil neighbor and avoid association with a wicked person. By the way, I mean, I hate to say it, but right, did you see that the horrible story in the news about the neighbor that was complaining about their neighbor firing their gun, right? And then they went over and they asked the person to stop, and I mean, this horrible thing, right? And he attacked and killed many members of that household. Like, it's hard not to see that news story and then to read this right here, right? There's something
Yeah,
about
well,
it.
and in today's world, it's definitely risky. But you see people in cars
Yeah,
where if you cut in front of them or something, or if you give them the finger or something, you're afraid they're going to turn around and shoot you.
yeah, no, 100%. Right. So the question is, how do those first two teachings connect with this don't despair about retribution? Is it just like this guy Nitai of Arbel, these were the three teachings he was known for, right? And it's disconnected, or is it connected? What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely connected.
How so?
It's like the mirror image of what came before.
Okay, but what about
And worrying,
yeah, go ahead.
the divine retribution is a little murkier.
Yeah, any thoughts? Like, why that? Here.
I guess if you don't
You might
associate with evil, you don't have to worry about divine retribution.
Okay. One would hope so, right? So this is more about us. Okay.
I'm not sure I understand that verse. Al tityaesh min hapur'anut.
You don't understand the Hebrew? No. I didn't mean
No,
that
no, no.
facetiously. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. If some things are awful, don't despair. I'm not sure I understand it.
Yeah. Well, obviously, they aren't either. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I don't know if something is missing here. Because the retribution comes from God, right? But this verse doesn't say anything about God doing anything here.
Yeah. By the way, right, I would probably say this, a punishment is I usually translate poranut as punishment, right? Meaning punishment from God, right?
Now,
Puranut is calamity.
Or calamity, that's probably a better. Thank you. You're always better than me. Yeah, calamity.
I still don't understand. I understand.
Oh.
Don't be friends with a bad neighbor.
Yeah.
Wicked man, I understand that, but I don't understand that verse.
Yeah. So let's look at Rabbi Elad Applebaum's first, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll go back to Rabbi Tucker's after. So Jackie, if you can read, let's just read her whole teaching from here as a counterbalance. Do you see that?
as a counterbalance to the teachings of Yehoshua ben Berachia, which emphasize the importance of connection with other people.
Right, by the way, can I just
them-
pause you for 1 second? If you remember,
Yeah.
his third one was judge everyone favorably, right? So it wasn't just like make friends and find yourself a mentor, but it was also like everybody's good, like, see the good in everyone, if you remember. That was what he said. Okay, now go ahead.
which emphasize the importance of connection with other people, Nitai from our teaches, distance yourself from an evil neighbor, avoid association with a wicked person, and do not despair about divine retribution. Don't put your faith in every person, he cautions, and also resist the temptation to get intimately close to every person, because there are those who are not yet ready to sustain a reciprocal relationship. Be wary of those in whose hearts evil actually has settled, and do not underestimate the dangers connected with establishing ties to such people. Such dangers are real and can ultimately exhaust the fragile trust you have somehow learned to have in people, which, if lost, cannot easily be restored.
I'm going to pause you here for 1 second, right? Like, this is very beautiful. It's really important, right? On one hand, it's, the first teaching was, approach people without any guard up, right?
Right.
That's beautiful. That's
Be open
moving.
and
That's ideal. But now we're saying, let's be realistic, right? You
Right.
do have to, protect yourself, right?
it's a warning.
Right? You can't always be vulnerable, right? Okay, because like once you get hurt, it's really hard to mend that, right? And restore
Yep.
that. Okay, go ahead.
In this context, do not despair means not to delude yourself about the world. Be realistic about identifying evil where it lurks, not so that you become a suspicious, mistrustful person, but so that you may live a long life, strengthened by the work of building a healthy, worthy society for your own nation and for all humanity.
All right. What do you take that as the commentary?
It's sensible. It's a good middle of the road. I always say, to be a friend, and to have a friend, you need to be a friend, but you have to sort of be aware of certain things that if something doesn't ring true, follow that instinct.
All right, Ruth, does this help you at all?
Yes, yeah. I like this explanation better.
Does someone want to like say it in their own words, how they think Rabbi Tamar is reframing this idea? Don't despair about calamity, about punishment, about retribution.
She says, be realistic.
All right, so I'm taking this as, I'll tell you how I'm taking her commentary on this is, right? Like, there is evil in the world, and there is
good in the world.
there's good in the world, right? And so don't, like, for all the tsuris that we see, right? Right? Don't despair because there is also good in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right? And there are calamities, right? And there are people who bring calamity upon themselves too, right?
Slimazils.
Okay, now let's get Rabbi Tucker. Rabbi Tucker takes a different understanding of this. It's long, and he's a philosopher, so I'm gonna sort of give you my warning now. Okay? All right. Jackie, you want to read the connection?
Okay. And do not despair about divine retribution. The connection with Nietzsche's initial teaching about shunning bad associations seems to be this. In observing the world and its workings, one may surely get the sense that evildoers are often not required.
Not requited.
Not
Yeah.
requited,
Yeah.
and that there is no answer to Jeremiah's plaintive question, why does the way of the wicked prosper? Despairing of seeing just deserts in this world might lead one to wonder whether it might not make more sense just to join with the wicked and be done with it. To that siren thought, Nitai responds directly, do not despair.
Right, this is a different reading, I think, if I'm right.
Don't give up.
Right, so now what Rabbi Tucker is reading into this is, right, Nitai starts with stay away from evil, right? Stay away from wicked and evil people. And then Nitai is questioning or answering the question, okay, but why do wicked people not always get punished, right? Right? So he's saying here, don't despair because maybe they haven't been punished. Right? That's how I think I'm reading Rabbi Tucker's understanding of this, which is a very different reading than Rabbi Tamar's reading of it. Right? So, and he's going to go later, he goes through a whole philosophical thing, and if he says, right, that we should train ourselves, you can see it, we should train ourselves not to make the connection between doing good and doing well, especially when things are going well for us. Nitai's advice, on the other hand, applies to the circumstance when prosperity has already evaporated. In such circumstances of suffering, allowing ourselves to lose faith in a balancing of the books could tempt us to embrace immorality out of an imagined expediency. Seen in this way, Antigonus and Nitai, each in his own way, we didn't read Antigonus, but that's from number 3, 1-3, may both be urging us to do good for its own sake. Right? In the end, he actually comes to the same answer as Rabbi Tamar, which is, don't focus on sort of the end result, always strive to do good. I don't know if we answered or not, but we're going to move on. We got a lot to do. We still have so many more teachings. Okay, I'm going to switch to Sherry. You ready to read, Sherry?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Okay, let me.
Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shattach received it from them.
I'm actually, no offense, we're going to skip this one. It's a beautiful teaching, but time is money. I don't know, not really, but we just don't have enough time to cover. We're not going to literally do everyone's story. We're going to switch to, he's actually very legal. Then we switch to a very legal sense, and it's almost like, well, law court rule, but I wanted to look specifically at this one. Go ahead.
Shimon ben Shattach liked to say, examine the witnesses extensively, but be careful with your words, lest others learn from them how to lie.
Okay. Interesting teaching, right?
Right. The various sages mentioned in Avot up until this point appear very infrequently in the rest of rabbinic literature. Shimon ben Shattach, however, appears much more frequently, especially in various legends that shed light on his courage, his ethical steadfastness, and his political acumen. Those legends placed him in the time.
Oh, sorry.
Find it again. Place him in the time of the Hasmonean king Alexander Jannaeus, who reigned from 103 to 76 BCE. For example, we find an interesting story in the Talmud about the time Shimon ben Shattach presided over a case to which the king himself was a party. The tale highlights Shimon's fearlessness in insisting on the court's sacred obligation to the truth, irrespective of whatever deference the king might have expected or demanded.
Okay, we're going to pause here. So we're going to get very legal. Now, mind you, the Mishnah is a legal code, you probably know. And there were courts, and there were rabbinic courts. So here the Mishnah is addressing, or is being addressed or taught by someone who actually sat in a court where the king was brought to trial. Yeah, Ron?
the original Mishnah, in the words of Perry Mason, that would be, you can't lead the witness.
Yeah, thank you, right? You cannot lead the witness, right? Okay, good. Other thoughts, comments? Why are we focused on that today? Like, what's so important to us? I mean, we're not lawyers, correct? And hopefully we're not going to be on a witness stand either, right?
We're in that situation now.
Well, that's true. Yeah, whether we expected it or not. Yeah. So let's shift to Rabbi Tamar, and Sherry, if you can read Balancing the Perspective. Well, we didn't read the first two. Go to Do Not Be Silent, right after the bold.
Right after, where are we?
Rabbi Tamar is doing examine the witness extensively, but be careful with your words.
Do not be silent out of fear of rendering judgment, he teaches. Do not tell yourself the story in a way that will be more comfortable for you personally, but that runs the risk of obscuring any injustice you perceive to have occurred. The witness who comes forward in court is a symbol of the human ability to testify, clarify, inquire, and judge wisely and justly. Sorry, your picture is blocking the next section, Rabbi. All right, do not avoid engaging with such people, Shimon ben Shatach teaches, and do not hold back from them. Most of all, do not allow the defendant's all too human intellectual and emotional virtuosity to bring about a dereliction in your responsibilities to society and indeed to life itself. Anybody?
Okay, so yeah, we're going to pause here for a second. So what do you take from this commentary about how to examine witnesses from Rabbi Tamar? What do you think she's saying here?
She talks about the risks that are implicit in telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, telling truth to power is usually a very risky business.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. I think she's playing on, or not playing is the wrong word. She is focusing on, if you remember, every rabbi in the Zugot teaches 3 teachings, right? So the first one is examine the witnesses extensively. I think she's playing on the second one. Be careful with your words, lest others learn from them how to lie. That's a pretty strong statement, right? Be careful with your words, lest others learn from them how to lie. Not how to live, right?
Right.
Right? That you have to be very careful because other people can learn from you how to lie, right? So she's saying, right, when you are questioning someone, it's very important how you're questioning, what the questions are, and that there's risk embedded in it. So this is sort of her answer. Sherry, I'm going to jump you to the back, which is, if you can see a life of Torah, I can't get there, but.
I got it. A life of Torah is a life in which there is real grappling with real human beings, people who make errors, who sin, who commit intentional and unintentional offenses, and who succumb to the temptation to do evil. And the 2 sages in these 2 Mishnayot seek to endow students of Torah with the strength to properly use the tools available to them. They surely do not want the language of law and judgment to be the only one in which the story of humankind is told, but neither do they want to ignore reality and neglect the needs of society. A person's gaze must flit back and forth constantly between mercy, that is tzedakah, kind and charitable behavior, and justice, that is mishpat, the norms of law and jurisprudence. Each moment has its appropriate perspective, And this is precisely the quality that God saw in Abraham and praised. I have to move it up a little bit. Saying, for I have singled him out that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of Adonai by doing tzedakah and mishpat.
So there's a balance between injustice, between being merciful and being judgmental. And that, I liked in particular the first line of this. A life of Torah is a life in which there is a real grappling with human beings, people who make error and sins, and who succumb to do evil, and people who, want to be strong, right? And that we have to sort of balance both the mercy and the tzedakah. We probably didn't go deep enough to get a full understanding of this Mishnah, but I'm trying to plow forward a little bit. So I want to focus more on the next one. Anyone else want to be a reader? Not that Sherry didn't do a great job, but if anyone else wants to have a voice. Ruth, can you read it in Hebrew?
Yes. הלל ושמאי קיבלו מהם. הלל אומר, הווה מתלמידיו של אהרון, אוהב שלום ורודף שלום, אוהב את הבריות ומקרבן לתורה.
Right, this may sound familiar. Hillel and Shammai received the tradition from them, meaning this is the next generation of the Zugot, right, the next generation of the pairs. And Hillel, we'll get Hillel's teaching first, be one of the students of Aaron the high priest, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving people, and bringing them close to the Torah. Right? Again, this probably is three separate teachings, because there's three levels to it, right? To be like Aaron, there are three levels. One is loving peace and pursuing peace. The second is loving all people, humanity. And the third is bringing them close to Torah. So again, the rabbis have three roles. So someone want to read? I liked Rabbi Tucker's commentary on this. Someone want to read this?
I can read now.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay, so starting where it says this Mishnah?
This Mishnah, yeah.
Excuse me. This Mishnah brings us to the last generation of diarchs, that of Hillel and Shammai. It also continues our boat's description of the emergence of a whole new culture in the post-biblical period, one possessed of a set of values and ideals that often turn the received norms substantially around, if not on their heads. Who can think of Aaron without thinking of the grand priestly vestments, the sacrificial system over which he and his descendants presided, his need to remain cloistered away from the nation within the sacred precincts of the temple? Moreover, Aaron's service was not one that was taught to the masses, but was rather handed down as a closely held family-based esoteric art to his sons and his sons' sons. And now comes Hillel and advises us to become students of Aaron.
All right, what do you think? Before we get there, what do you think so far? Have you ever thought of this? When we say this beautiful thing, be like the students of Aaron, the disciples of Aaron?
Well, this says it's just his family, or Aaron himself he would have taught the other priests. I mean, not just his sons. Well, actually, it's supposed to be hereditary, so maybe just his son.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what Rabbi Tucker is opening this with. Like, right? It's a beautiful teaching, but when we think about Aaron, right? There are all the clothes that only Aaron can wear, right? Right? Like they'll teach that it's a hereditary position that is only passed down to his male progeny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's pretty
He was the first Kohen, that then the number of people at that time would have been very small.
Yeah, and it was like sort of not a secret society, but it was sort of a secret society, right? Now we have, again, now if we go to a little bit of potentially, how you understand the Torah. If you understand that the Torah was made of different books that were woven together. And, the Torah that we have today is a little bit different. This is whether you want to call source criticism or documentary hypothesis or whatever it's called, right? There's potentially an idea that the book of Leviticus, Sefer Vayikra, that we're in now, which is really like the code for Kohanim, right? That potentially was a separate book, right? And that it got woven in as there was sort of more pluralism within Judaism. But that's maybe a side point, right? So Rabbi Tucker's asking, like, yes, it's this beautiful idea. We're all going to be disciples of Aaron, but right, was it originally so? So it picks up. I'm going to bring it back to the top of the next column. Okay. Go ahead, Eric.
But what they're
Oh.
saying is that the Kohanim had strict rules that they had to adhere to. And in doing their job, they have to individualize, but stay close to the rules.
Yes, right. All he's asking here is if if the whole, like the beginning of this beautiful teaching that we say all the time is be like a student of Aaron. I don't know, his students was a pretty small class. I couldn't be a student of Aaron, could you?
No.
Right.
Don't-
So that's what he's saying is like, who are we talking about? What are we talking about here? What are the values? Is it about the sacrificial part and all the ritualistic part, or is it something? So what else are we talking about? That's what he's saying here. So go ahead, Eric.
But what is the image we are given of Aaron here? A man who epitomizes the pursuit of interpersonal peace, a lover of humanity and individual people, and one whose goal is, quote, bringing them close, unquote, to Torah. This phrase, in fact, reflects a deliberate pun in the Hebrew. The word mekarvan has the very same root letters as the Hebrew word for sacrifice, korban. The Aaron we thought we knew was the one who brought offerings close, quote, to the altar, while the rest of the community, the non-priests, were warned not to come close to the off-limits holy space. The Aaron we are now urged to emulate is the one who does not live and work within walls that keep the unauthorized out, but rather touches people everywhere in an effort to bring them closer to the real source of holiness, which is not the altar, but rather a life lived in Torah.
Beautiful, right? Let's just pause here for a second, right? I mean, it's a beautiful commentary, right? Right, that I don't know if you caught this play on the word korban, right?
Yes.
Mekarvan the Torah, which we say pretty much every day. It's in our morning prayers. Right now, we add it to the end of we read this idea of the different ways that we understand Torah, which is our lead into Kaddish Rabbanan, right? And that's sort of the closing thing that many of us say, right? So it's this, again, if you studied with me before, right? Our tefillot, our prayers seem to be a transition from a sacrificial system to a prayer-focused system. So again, we're taking that word, korban, sacrifice, and we're turning it into how do we get closer? How do we connect? Any other comments or thoughts from what Eric read?
So how do we transition from the very, very closely held, seems like very, very few people, to what they say at the end? It's sort of a transition.
Yeah, there's definitely transition. And also, right, this idea that, right, he worked within the confines of the Mishkan, or then his children from the Beit HaMikdash, right? Working within the confines, how did they actually go on the outside to teach people how to live a life of Torah? Here we go. This is not an answer, but this is the transition. If you can read about the Rabbi Natan.
About the Rabbi Natan builds upon the idea behind the stunning reversal of Aaron's image by telling the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, whom we will encounter in chapter 2, comforting his disciple Yehoshua when the latter was grieved at the loss of the temple. Don't grieve too much, he told the student, because acts of kindness to human beings will be just as good as a path to atonement as the altar ever was. It is particularly noteworthy that the time which Hillel taught this message was not subsequent to the destruction of the temple, but rather while it was still in existence. And thus the teaching cannot be construed as advice about reconciling to a substitute for what has been lost, but instead should be seen as a deliberate shift of paradigm.
Okay, so we actually need to read the next page in order to tell us this, right? So I'm gonna, if it's okay, we're gonna go to Rabbi Tamar's commentary. That's gonna help us a little bit. Okay, Eric, if you can pick up the individual.
So the individual as a member of human society bears responsibility toward that society. His or her personal well-being is tied in with its overall well-being, that is, with the well-being of all its other individual members, and one cannot act responsibly towards oneself without doing so towards them as well. Thus, of all the people's teachers, Hillel chooses neither famous legislators nor great scholars, but Aaron as his example of the ideal citizen, an ideal drawn in more detail, the text found in Avot, the Rabbi Natan.
Okay,
Well,
right, so number one, Rabbi Tamar just noting that, right, if Hillel's gonna pick a person, and what we didn't read is she frames that this mission is all about the responsibilities that we have as free people, right? What, as a free person in the world, who teaches us responsibility? Who's gonna be the model for it, right? And she says it could be many people in our tradition. So it's Dafka, why specifically Aaron? And it's this commentary. So now
so
we
who
need to
said
read.
this? Is this Hillel who said this? Because this reminds me of the treat other people as you wish to be treated. That seems to be sort of in there.
Yes, this is Hillel, right? Who, right? If you're right, what's his statement on Behavta l'recha kamocha? Love your neighbors, you love yourself. What does he say? Anyone know?
זה
Yeah.
כלל גדול בתורה.
That's Akiva.
Oh,
That's Rabbi Akiva,
yeah.
right? This is, if you remember, the person goes into Shammai and says,
Yeah.
I'll convert, right? I'll convert if you can teach me the entire Torah, regal achat, standing on one foot. And Shammai says, what are you talking about? Like, teach you the entire Torah in 1 minute? Like, you're not sincere, there's no way that you're fit for this, right? And what does Hillel say?
ואהבת לרעך כמוך.
Yeah, but he doesn't actually say that. What does he say? he gives his version of it. If you remember, he rewrites it. Do not do what is hateful to you unto others. He spins it in the negative, actually, right? He says, right,
Mashasanu alecha.
right? So he says that verse, but he says it in a little different way, right? Do not do what is hateful to you to other people, right? And the rest is commentary.
The rest commentary. Now go and study.
Now go and study, right? So that's Hillel. So yes, that is Hillel, right? And it's about this idea about how we treat other people and ourselves. That's Hillel. So yeah, that is an interesting frame that it's a seen person we're talking about. Okay. Now, getting back, what the indented thing that we're going to read here is Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is a rabbinic text sort of from the time period of the Talmud and the Mishnah, but it didn't make it in, right? This is a midrash, which is going to tell about qualities of Aaron the high priest outside of sacrifices and his work as a Kohen that potentially could be why he's the role model that Hillel picks to be the person who shows us what it means to take individual responsibility. Okay? Now you can read it, Eric.
Okay. Rabbi Meir explained how Aaron exemplified the phrase, quote, and turned many away from sin, from Malachi. When Aaron would be out walking and would come across a wicked or depraved individual, he would greet him using the word shalom. The next day, that person would set out to commit some sin or another, but would stop first and say, woe is me, how will I be able to meet Aaron's eyes without being ashamed that such a man who offer me the blessing of peace should see me behaving this way, and thus would such a person be steered away from sin.
Okay, so what's the first thing that we learn about Aaron from
He's
this?
non-judgmental.
Not just non-judgmental, definitely non-judgmental. What else?
He's going out of his way to greet and
Yeah,
even
I
the
guess.
sinful people.
Yeah, and as Jackie said, right? Like regardless of who the person is, right? Rich, poor, kind, the opposite, right? Like a real aganaf or whatever,
Doesn't
right?
matter.
Yeah,
It
He's
just
seeing,
doesn't matter.
he's seeing the good in everybody.
sees the good in everybody. By the way, if you remember, every rabbi is continuing that which they learned from the previous generation, which was, if you remember, that was Mishnah 6, right? Right, so interesting, different than the one who says stay away from those people, right?
Mhm.
So, okay, so that's the first thing, right? There's this beautiful idea that, right, oh, right, like Aaron recognized something good in me. No longer am I going to make bad choices because Aaron saw the good in me. I can see it too, right? It's beautiful, right? Okay, next example. Similar situation.
And a similar situation would pertain if Aaron came across two people quarreling. He would go and sit down with one of them and say, "My child, look at that person with whom you are quarreling, and you'll see someone beating his breast and rending his own garments and saying aloud, 'Woe is me, how can I meet that person's eyes without being ashamed? For I was the one who treated him poorly.'" And so Aaron would stay with that person until the rage in his heart was stilled. And then Aaron would go to see the other person and say, "My child, look at that person with whom you were quarreling. You see someone beating his breast or rending his own garments and saying aloud, 'Woe is me. How can I meet that person's eyes without being ashamed? For I was the one who treated him poorly.'" And so Aaron would stay with this one too until the rage in his heart was stilled. And then when the two would meet, they would hug and kiss each other in reconciliation.
Okay, pause for a second. Okay, story 2. Well, tell me, what is Aaron embodying here?
My first thought is, if only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's he embodying here? How many people shy away? Like if you see people in conflict, right? If you see people in conflict, if you see people that like refuse to talk to another person or berating another person, how many of you will just turn away? Or how many of you will potentially berate that person for what they're doing, right? They're just say like all the reasons they are wrong, right? What's Aaron's approach?
Rodef Salom.
Yeah, he's going to them and saying, do you know how bad that other person feels? Like they are so upset that they hurt you. You can't understand how upset they are they hurt you, right? Like all they want to do is make up with you, right? And then the other way, right? And then as after he sort of calms that person down, let them sort of see like that there is good in that other person. He goes to the other person and does the same exact thing. Like they are so upset that they hurt you, right? All they want to do is like make things better, right? So like, how incredible is this, right? That Aaron will put himself in that peacemaker's role, basically humbling, I don't know if humbling himself is the right word, but at least, he will do anything to make peace. All right, Eric, you want to keep reading?
Okay. As depicted here, Aaron is someone who is unable to meet another person and remain indifferent. He is involved with the other person's situation with his whole being as if it were his own. And the Hebrew language reflects this point wonderfully. Embedded in the word for responsibility, acharayut, is the word for other, acher, thus suggesting that responsible people are those deeply imbued with a sense of obligation towards others and the recognition that others' instances of distress and discomfort are in some way their own. The internal acceptance of responsibility manifests itself externally in encounters with others and signals an individual's readiness to draw near to the Torah and its values. The love of human beings itself draws people close to the love of Torah.
All right, what do you guys think? Is that a good reason for Aaron to be the exemplar for these ideas? Have you seen that? Let me ask another question. This is Midrash, right, that we read. Is there anything in Aaron's life where you can actually see it in action that's not a Midrash, in the actual Torah?
Is it that he was not quiet, but when his sons died, you don't see him mourning. I mean, he was mourning, but
Yeah.
quietly.
Yeah, he did not scream and cry out, right? He didn't carry on. By the way, this is something that the rabbis question, right? Was that a beautiful thing? Was it a brave thing? Was it an important teaching tool or not? Yeah, it's a question the rabbis have.
I think he was stunned. He didn't know what to say, so he was quiet.
Yeah, right. There's a question that he was just speechless, right? And
Yeah.
thank God I haven't had to grieve, in a close way, so I can't speak from experience other than from all the people that I've worked with and tried to support that many people find loss. They are lost for words in that moment. What about the idea just that Aaron oftentimes when the people made a mistake, he would be the first to approach God and to beg for forgiveness, along with Moses, right? He
first thing
would
comes to
throw
mind-
himself on the ground. Yep.
First thing comes to mind is the golden calf episode.
Yeah.
He was, how involved was he, and that was a tough position for him to be in.
A very tough decision. Yeah. Yeah. And he probably favored the people too much. Yeah.
And after the death of his sons, his not emoting and saying anything, he did not want to berate God.
Yeah.
what-
And that's what Ruth was saying. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good question. We want to try to get a full picture of who this person is, right? And what Aaron's role is and why he's sort of being upheld here. We have 3 minutes. I want to just look at the Hebrew, if you can help me with the Hebrew of the next one as our sort of transition point to say goodbye. We're jumping to 116, and if you can read that in Hebrew for me.
גמליאל אומר, עשה לך רב והסתלק מן הספק ואל תרבה לעשר עומדות.
Okay. Again, we skipped a few. We're in the pairs, the zugot. Now it's the great Rabban Gamliel that we've probably heard of before, right? He says, first, find yourself a teacher. Does this sound familiar?
Yep.
We've already had it, right? So
Verse 6.
interestingly, sometimes a tradition gets passed down and they're going to repeat it because they think it's that important, right? Aseh lecha rab, right? Find a teacher, it's repeated. What about this? V'histalek min hasafek. Steer clear of uncertainty. What do you think that means?
What does one have to do with the other? Sort of.
Yeah, they don't always, I don't know if I said this before, they don't always have to mesh, right? These are the 3 teachings these people were known for, right? They don't always have to connect. It's just the teachings, steer clear of uncertainty, right? I'll take this meaning, be deliberate. Be deliberate, right?
Be
It's important
precise.
to be precise, deliberate, right? And in fact, we've seen that before. I don't know if we looked at it or I skipped it, but be deliberate in judgment is one of the teachings, again, from a previous generation. And do not too often tithe your produce by estimation. It's an interesting teaching, right?
That one.
Right? Do not too often tithe your produce by estimation, meaning that this is one of those, you should be exact, right? When the tithe was the gift to God in gratitude for our bounty, for the produce that, when we were farmers or whatever else, right? That are produce that the land provided, right? Don't do it by estimation, right? Be exact, because we should be giving to God exactly what we promised to God. I'm going to pause here. Sorry I started a little bit late. We're going to do a little bit more in our weeks between Pesach and Shavuot during the Omer. We're going to read a little bit more. We're going to do the last Mishnah of chapter 1 and then jump to chapter 2 next time. So thanks for studying with me, and I'll see you soon.